Hello, Big Geeks. Welcome to the first segment on the Craft Beer Channel stage. We are going to be diving into the technicalities of how to taste beer, and we're delighted to say that we're joined by the wonderful Melissa Cole.
Hello, how are we doing?
Yeah, we're okay.
We're doing all right.
We're getting into the swing of things.
It's live television.
I tell you what, you can tell we're nerds, can't you, when actually it's such a stunning bank holiday weekend day, and here we are inside.
I can see it just out there. Blue skies. And now we've just got LED lights instead. So thanks for joining us for the first segment, Melissa.
Excited.
I know.
And happy birthday, Siren, obviously. It's exclusive.
Well, yes, that too.
How has it only been 8 years?
It does seem longer, doesn't it?
It does.
Is that why they're celebrating 8?
Greatest respect. I think when Darren had just formed the brewery, we basically spent the whole time trying to meet up in Denver at Great American Beer Festival, and we never ever managed it. And then just as I landed back in the UK in, frankly, a bit of a horrible state, on the train in between terminals at Heathrow, and some bloke comes up to me and goes, "Sorry, are you Melissa?" I'm just like, "Oh, please don't talk to me. I've just got off of a 9-hour flight and I'm really hungover for days. And oh my God, what?" And he went, "I'm Darren." I was like, "Oh my God." So yes, so that's how Darren and I first met.
Timing, Darren. Timing.
Yeah.
Right, we're on a tight ship. So should we get the beer open? Also, because Brad's been chomping at the bit to open it since we got it out the fridge.
Got a first on, Johnny.
Wiggle.
Squiggles, so everybody in your box, you should have a can of Squiggle, which is this absolutely beautiful can here. Going to come into focus any second. There we go. So it's a hazy pale ale with Idaho, Mosaic, and Citra, all the big hitters. And we're going to use this to explain to you how to taste beer like a beer judge. And we always say on the Craft Beer Channel that it's going to seem a bit intensive, but the more you know about beer, the more that you can shut the hell up and just enjoy it.
Exactly.
So let's get this.
Guys, if you've got any questions for us as well, you can send them in. Questions on how to taste beer. We are looking to see these questions come in.
So the first thing you want to do, don't fill your glass completely. Let's get it about a third full, so that we've got plenty of room at the top of the glass, so that you can get those aromas and get your face in there rather than just getting a nose full.
I've totally fallen at the first hurdle. I filled it half full.
Way hardcore, which we'll be learning about in the Nitro segment in a bit. So obviously you drink with your eyes first. We've got there's a nice little bit of head on the top that's sticking around. That's always nice. And I think it's fair to say that's hazy, right, Melissa?
I think we can definitely say that's hazy. We could also play a game of beer or chicken soup.
Right, so the first thing that we want to do when we're appraising a beer is get the aroma. So much of the actual flavour of beer is actually aroma. It comes through the nose, not through what's on the tongue and the roof of your mouth. So we're going to start with that. We're going to start with a slightly weird approach, and it's called the pass. So in between all of these tastings, we're going to give it a swirl. That breaks down the volatile compounds in the beer and gets it into the glass. And then this time, we're just going to pass it across our shoulders at that height and just give it a good sniff. Now, probably 9 times out of 10, you're not going to get much, and that's okay. The idea behind this is to pick out the really big, really bold flavors, and often some of the off flavors that might be jumping out off the glass. Of course, with Siren, there's going to be no such thing. But the same as when I cracked that can, I just got a waft of mango each time it went past me.
Yeah, fresh, bright mango.
That's kind of the top note that we're going to get from there. So that's called the pass, and that's where you're going to pick up the absolute top notes. And now we're going to delve into more of it. So we're going to give it another swirl. And then we're going to do what's called the bloodhound. Now, the bloodhound, if you've ever watched a dog sort of on the trail of something, it's not just sniffing hard like it's doing a line of Coke. It's taking 3 short, sharp sniffs, and that's because your nose is best at detecting differences in aroma.
So it's like every time it's almost like resetting what your brain's telling you it's smelling.
Yeah, so you're going to breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out with your head right in.
Are you going to give us a real close-up, Johnny, on your face? That's going to be fun.
I can do, just in case people are confused. Swirl, 3 sharp sniffers. What do you get there, Melissa?
I'm picking up pineapple, papaya, a bit of kiwi fruit. It's really, really rich. There's also kind of an underlying sweetness of something like rice pudding.
Rice pudding.
Rice pudding.
So maybe something from the wheat or something like that coming through.
Yeah,
I'm getting lots of mango and pineapple. It's very much like a can of lilt or something going off in my face.
Yeah. So obviously with this beer, we've got huge aromas coming off of it because of the big dry hop. But some beers are a little bit more subtle, and you might need to do what's called the heady sniff. So again, we throw sort of all decorum out the window. We give it a swirl. We put our face in it, and we give a giant long sniff and try and send the aromas to the back of your head and get your synapse firing. And for me, that's a little bit greener, a little bit.
So like a freshness, isn't there? Like
Yeah.
a summery freshness.
Yeah,
So really
that's
delving
what
down into the softer stuff.
I was picking that up as the kiwi earlier.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that green kind of note coming from that. And now, if there's something you can't quite put your finger on, there's something there, but you're like, I don't know whether, maybe it's a little hint of butter, or maybe it's a little hint of popcorn, or maybe it's a little hint of caramel that you weren't getting at first. The final thing you can do is called the covered sniff. So all that is the same swirl, but put your hand over the top. And then you're going to do the heady sniff again. And it's just a way of really appraising something that you thought you could get. Make sure you move your hand out of the way, otherwise you're going to get the aroma of your hand.
So it's livened it up, hasn't it, doing that? It just feels like it's
concentrated it a little bit, yeah.
Get more of that passion fruit note coming through. That pineapple
absolutely.
passion fruit. There's an almost perceived sort of acidic fruit there.
Yeah, more acidity actually on that one, definitely, yeah.
Yeah.
So then we can actually drink it, you'll be pleased to know. Obviously, you shouldn't do all of that with every beer you taste and every time you take a sip, because also you're knocking carbonation out of the beer. But now we can drink. So give it a swirl and give it a drink. And the important thing to do at the end is breathe back out after you've swallowed. And what that's doing is it's sending the aromas that you just ingested straight back out of your nose. So you get what's called the retronasal appreciation.
Yes, great stuff.
You'll get some of that final aroma.
So you say it like that, but I find that absolutely fascinating that effectively the same set of tools that you've used to smell something, that just the simple act of sending air back down your nose is actually making you taste, your brain thinks you're tasting still. And that to me is absolutely fascinating. It's one of the incredible things about the whole olfactory system is actually that your nose does two jobs, including tasting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And it's why when you have a cold, you can't taste much, because the cold doesn't affect your tongue, it's affecting your nose.
Yeah.
So yeah, that is how to taste beer like a beer judge. We were taught that by Ray Daniels, who's the founder of the Cicerone beer server certifications. And you can watch a video where we interview him and chat about it on our channel. But for now, I think it's now time to dive into the brain of Melissa, who's going to talk to us about how these different flavors are produced by which ingredients in the beer, using Squiggle as an example. So Melissa, I mean, I think lots of people think about the hops when they think about this beer, but yeast is super important with this style as well.
Actually, I'd say that water's probably your most important thing with this style. Sorry to be a smart straight away there, Johnny. But absolutely, actually getting the water right is incredibly important, and it's what so many people have got wrong over the years about this style, about this sort of. I think I would definitely categorize this more, if I wanted to be like super nitpicky and do all that sort of stuff, I think I'd classify this more as juicy under the new guidelines, because it has got a balancing bitterness, whereas sort of the hazy is more perceived as having no balancing bitterness, and just being very sweet. And the reason for that also is because normally when you have this kind of beer, due to a lot of different factors, it's about making sure that you get your haze into it. It's making sure that actually the bitterness is softened, and that the whole mouthfeel of it is that you invert the way that you would normally treat the brewing water. So your chlorides and your sulfates are inverted. So you do more with the, oh God, this is the one where I panic every time I say this, more with the chlorides than you do with the sulfates. So it's different from brewing an IPA where you really want, like a trad IPA, where you want that bitterness to come pow straight at you. You want this to be more rounded and pillowy and soft.
And so how do you enhance? You've got this water that, you know, feels kind of thicker and has less of that sulfate character that can add to bitterness. Obviously, then you're building onto that with the malt bill.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where that layering comes in. You'll find that mostly it's just very pale malts that are used in these styles. Sometimes a very small little tiny bit of colour, but also lots of wheat and protein building, sometimes whether it be malted wheat or torrefied wheat. You'll find that people are using quite often oats as well. You'll find that people are using those sorts of things to try and get that protein. It's why these beers, obviously I've been held in my hand, and I've given it a number of swirls as per instructions. Just for once, I have to say I was actually following instructions. It doesn't happen very often. It would hold the head much better. And that's part of it, but it's also about keeping this haze in suspension as well. So that's another part of it. And if you think about German wheat beers, the Germans have been doing this for, you know, centuries. It's nothing. There's nothing new. It's just how people actually use it is the difference.
Yeah. Should we check if there's any questions, Bradley?
There aren't any questions.
There aren't any questions.
No, I don't know.
Do you know what this is?
Zero questions.
This is early doors fear. I guarantee you, once everybody's got their first beer down them, there'll be questions flying in. So don't have any fear, guys. We're not scary, I promise.
We didn't show it, Johnny, but we've got this lovely guide, haven't we, to how to taste beer, which is in our first book, Beer School, which is a crash course in craft beer, which you might as well plug, eh? Why not?
Well, absolutely, yeah. That's still available at independent bookshops and the giant thing that will not be named.
It's named after a river in South America, is how I always put it.
Yes, the river in South America, which is probably where I'll end up once it's been pulped as well. So let's have a chat about the hops as well, because, you know, a lot of these beers are predominantly, you get that character from the dry hop. There's a bit of bitter in there, so there's definite kettle hops, but what kind of different aromas are you going to get from a dry hop addition to a bittering addition, Melissa?
Well, I think one of the things to sort of just make clear is what those two things are, because dry hop sounds totally anathema in a liquid product. So when we talk about kettle hops or first hops, we're talking about the hops that are added earlier on in the making of a beer to give bitterness. Now, what you have to do is you have to isomerize, which is effectively you're changing the chemical nature of the bittering compounds so that they become water soluble. And so that's really, really important. It also helps to sterilize and do lots of other clever things as well. But that's really important. Now, with these types of beers, I would say that 99.9% of the brewers that I've talked to about this actually don't do the traditional either addition immediately as the wort, the sweet liquid, which is the basis for all beer. As it starts boiling, actually what they'll do is they'll add it much, much later. And that's actually something that I picked up before this style of beer became popular. And it's something I've done with a lot with collaborations. And what it is you don't get such a harsh extraction either of the alpha acids or the beta acids, which is what you're trying to get out of those hops when you start boiling them. So, and it's a really, really clever trick that you get very, very soft bitterness. So you don't need very long actually to start the isomerization process or the extraction of the bitterness compounds. You can start it really sort of 15 minutes from the end of the boil. So, but I think most brewers will probably be adding it about 20 minutes, half an hour. And then those dry hops. Well, dry hopping is actually an expensive process. But there is process, so even when you're using pellets, you do lose a lot of beer. So hops come in different forms, so that they can be a whole flower, so literally the dried kilned flour that comes off of the bines, so that's with a B, not a V. And then they can be pelletized, or there's also some incredible cryo hops now, so effectively sort of cryogenically frozen and into powder form. And there's also some really, really amazing hop oils and hop concentrates that are now available, which are really very different from our ideas of those of old, which was when one of the reasons why a lot of people think beers have chemicals in them is the early experiments with what's known as sort of the bitterness addition. Is actually the problem was that they got it really wrong about the ways that they were adding it, and unfortunately it caused people to spend quite a bit of time in the smallest room in the house, I think is the nice way to put it. So yes, there's incredible ways that you can, incredible natural, these are all still natural products. I think it's really important to make sure that we say, and we've got lots of those still, lots of ways to do that. So it's really interesting. But this happens on the cold side. So all you're looking at, so the beer's been brewed, it's gone through, it might be added during fermentation, or it's in maturation, and it's come to the end of, it's sitting there and it's cold. So all you're getting out of that, because there is no heat present, is all the aroma compounds, and that's what dry hopping's about. Now, lots of sort of double dry hopping, and there's people talking about triple dry hopping and all that sort of stuff. I think you've got to have amazing practices in place to do that, and it's great to try beers from breweries that do it really well, but there's a lot of breweries out there who aren't doing it well, and they're introducing oxygen at the wrong point in the brewing process, and you're starting to get things like diacetyl, which is like a Werther's Original or butter popcorn, and that's a real shame because it just ruins the beer, really. Well, it certainly does for me. I'm very sensitive to it.
Yeah. Well, there's absolutely none of that here. It's a really crisp citric aroma that, it's a very light and fresh beer, but the aroma of it is super juiced.
It's for me, this is just, I'm sorry, everybody can hate me for this. I know that this is going to be, it's like we can't travel at the moment. But for me, this is like sitting down to all the glorious fruits I get in Brazil when I travel there for breakfast, and it's just like like eating a bowl of the best tropical fruit you can imagine. I know. I hate myself. I want to go back to Brazil. Anyway,
that leads us on to the first question. So the questions have started coming through, and we've got one from Chris Davies.
From Chris Davis, how can you train your nose to pick up some of these notes? Generally, I get some of them, some of the larger notes, but not a huge amount.
So I think the thing that really changed my point of view was somebody saying, if you're thinking you're not getting this aroma or this flavor, go away and eat that fruit or that brown bread or that rye bread, and then it will give your brain something to latch onto, so that when you do get it, you'll be like, oh, it's like that time I had that, which is like you in Brazil. It reminds you of Brazil, this kind of aroma.
So you've got to kind of have these experiences in your brain, your repertoire. You have to have tried these things maybe to sort of connect them.
Exactly.
That kind of leads on to this next question from AD.
Wait. Have you got anything to say before we?
That's okay. I mean, the other thing as well is I'd say this is actually quite like a Calippo, just slightly less acidic Calippo. And the other thing, if Chris, I'm not quite sure whether you're talking about the flavors that we're talking about, or whether you're talking about not being able to pick up off flavors, but you can get home brewer oriented off flavor kits. So if you want to know that, for example, you might well be blind to diacetyl. I actually know 4 or 5 professional brewers who are blind to diacetyl. So that Werther's Original cinema popcorn thing. So the more you know about your palate, if you're really that curious, then the better you will be trained. And it's not expensive to do that. And you can share it with all of your mates. And frankly, what you can do later on is you can train other people. And then you get the joy of watching somebody try butyric for the first, a spiked butyric beer for the first time, which is baby sick. So,
You've kind of answered my next question from AD Davis. Which was basically, can you train yourself to pick up more of the beer components by tasting over time, or is it more of an innate thing? Like, can we attune our palates, or are some people just naturally gifted?
Well, the simple fact of the matter is that biology does play a role. There's no two ways about it. You have to have actually the genetic receptors to try to actually be able to smell and taste things. So, but also your background and your environment will also play a role. So, for example, because I drink a lot of British cask beer when the pubs are open, I have a tendency not to be as keenly attuned when I judge in the US to what's hideously known as Burton Snatch. And so that sulfurous compound that comes from the way that you Burtonize water, and from the area of Burton, which was the birthplace of IPAs. Oh, sorry, not the birthplace, but the spiritual home, sorry, of IPAs. So you have to have that innate ability. So, for example, in the same way that some people taste soap when they eat coriander, that just means that they've got the gene that doesn't like coriander. Or if you hate Brussels sprouts, then that's more than likely a genetic thing as opposed to something else. So I just want to know which gene it is that I need to sort of switch around so that I can like raw tomatoes. I fundamentally hate them, which is weird because the rest of my family, actually apart from my niece, loves them. So, you know, all of these things are actually encoded into your DNA.
Is it a textural thing with the raw tomatoes, or is that?
I don't know. I can't get to the bottom of it, Brad, because I can't keep one in my mouth.
I'm a bit the same with the texture of a raw tomato. It makes me a bit like, oh.
Yeah, no.
Anyway, it's a beer channel. It's a beer festival.
Anyway.
I think the other thing to bear in mind is, there's definitely genetic influences, but it's important to understand that most people can taste. Sadly, some people do lose their sense to some extent, and so it's just like we said earlier, like Melissa said earlier, it's training your palate and understanding it, knowing that if you have a beer with diacetyl, that's going to really turn you off, or you might be quite blind to diacetyl but more sensitive to something else. So there's definitely innateness, but there's also just understanding your palate. You'll be able to get a bit more from it.
Yeah.
And also remembering that atmospheric change everything. So it could be literally the atmosphere, or it could be what you had for dinner an hour ago, or whatever it is will change the palate. So it's
I just wanted to quickly add, I'm sorry, I know this is a little bit cheeky, but some pals of mine, Ryan Riley and Kimberly Duke, have just written a book. They normally run something called the Life Kitchen. So if there's anybody out there who's got a family member or anybody who's lost their sense of smell and taste to COVID, they've literally just written a book about it. So if anybody wants to know about that, just drop me a line on Twitter. Because it's been my biggest fear. I don't know about you guys. Mm-hmm. My biggest fear of getting of contracting COVID was I might get long COVID with losing my sense of smell and taste. It was genuinely the biggest stressor throughout this whole process for me.
I think it would make life way more interesting if you can taste anything as well.
Too. Any more questions?
Yeah, so I guess we've talked about how obviously, with sensory stuff, taste, the smell of a beer, but is there something about the sort of the visual of a beer as well? We had a question from Robert Vorhian. Do you think can or bottle art influences what people expect from a beer in the same way the presentation of a plate of food is a feast for the eyes? So I guess, how influenced are we by beautiful cans, or even I would say the liquid looking hazy and delicious inside it?
There's been a really interesting flip, hasn't there? I think it used to be that hazy beer was a bit of a turn-off if you weren't in Germany. And now there's very much a lot of beer geeks who won't necessarily touch a beer if it's not hazy.
That's it. I think I know people that wouldn't drink a beer if they can actually shine a light through it and see the other side of it.
Yeah.
It took me a long time to really stop drinking with my eyes with beers like this, because immediately for me it was such a turn off. And frankly, I drank so many really rubbish ones early doors that it was one of those ones where I just went, and from breweries that were like, everybody was falling over themselves to try. And it's a bit like the big fruit bombs that are exploding all over the place at the moment. If I wanted to filter something through my teeth, I'd at least make sure it was a smoothie, so I'd be getting some health benefits out of it. I'm sorry. I think a lot of the time, a lot of the hype train creates a false sense of people's what they feel they should be enjoying, and it tells them that off flavors are okay, in the same way that big beer for years has done that by using green glass and clear glass and allowing light strike to become an intrinsic part of their more diacetyl or whatever. So I think the more people know about this kind of stuff, I think the better it is. And I think if you are seeing a big hype about something and you see a seriously trusted brewery, and I'm just saying this because I'm here, because I think everybody knows me better than that. Somebody like Siren makes a version, maybe go and try a version from Siren and go, actually, do you know, that's what that should taste like. And no, that's not what that should taste like. I think that's quite important to have benchmarks.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what great breweries are really good for. I think, there is definitely, it's a little bit hard to say because obviously everybody has a different idea of what a good beer should look like. There still are people that they only want crystal clear, straw colored beer with a big old head on it, like a German Helles.
I was going to say Germans.
Yeah, the Germans, yeah. But then of course there's like we said, people that won't touch a beer if it doesn't have a touch of haze to it, or a lot of haze to it, or people that still don't like dark beer. I still hear people going, "Oh, dark beer gives me a hangover." And you're like, so does toast? Like compared to bread?
It's a funny thing, isn't it? It's sort of how it's almost fashion, beer fashion.
Yeah,
and how that these things are in vogue for a while, and they're hypey and whatever.
Well, let's also remember that we're talking about a really small bubble here, really, to be honest.
Yeah. True.
In the grand scheme of things, I think that it's very easy to overinflate our bubble's influence on things. I think. I think I've only seen like 1 or 2 hazy beers on supermarket shelves still, so hasn't quite reached the masses.
Yes, this is a good question. I think we're talking about styles from Tom Mayer. What style do you find the hardest to judge?
I can answer that really easily. Rauch beers.
Right.
It's not my thing. It's just not my thing at all. I love beer. I love bacon. I just don't want bacon in my beer. I can tell whether anyone's good or not, but it's such a nightmare slog for me, and I find it really, I find it so invasive on my palate that actually I know. If I see it on my schedule and it's not and it normally is 99.9% of the time, it's the last judging of the day, because the people who organise these things know what they're doing. In the States for sure, but sometimes I've seen in other areas of the world where people haven't put Rauch beer as the last round of the day. It's like, if you want me to judge out, that's got to be my last round, or we've got to move it, because there's just no way I can do that and judge anything afterwards. And I'm going to have to spend the evening gargling mouthwash because it doesn't go away for me.
There's in a lot of judging competitions, there's always the specialty beer category, which is always the hardest to judge, because you'll get like a cherry beer next to a smoked beer, next to a barrel aged stout, next to a Berliner Weiss, next to a lambic style spontaneous beer, and you're like,
how do you do that?
Yeah, and crazy. Also your palate is a mess by the end.
I love those. I thrive on it, bouncing back and forth. Plus, also, I always like a good argument, so that's normally where you get the best arguments.
Yeah, that's my dread. But also, my palate, I know, is super sensitive to ethanol, so I tend to try not to judge the really high ABV beers, because I find them like you do with smoked malt. I find it dominates my palate and I struggle. So when I drink things like whiskey and stuff, I'm just like, it just burns.
It burns. Brad, it burns.
Which is a real shame, because I do like some really, soft and rounded bourbons. But
yeah. Talking of other drinks other than beer, we had a question from Eric Gilinski, great name. What do you think of aeration in the mouth, like in wine tasting? Is that a good thing to do when we're tasting beer?
No, the reason for doing that is going back to Johnny's comments. A lot of it is actually to soften that hard alcohol.
Yeah.
And unless you're looking at a freeze distilled beer of bazillion % for some willy waving reason, you don't need to do that for beers at all. It's just not necessary. You shouldn't have that level of fusel alcohol in there.
So the aeration that you do in your mouth is almost a way of knocking out that crazy alcoholic kick.
Yeah, it's really interesting. The more I've been reading a lot of research recently on, for example, decanting and things like that for wine, and And actually, unless you do the whole, sort of back and forth, it's mostly really fallacy.
Really?
And all that kind of stuff. So it's just actually a lot of it is just about losing that fusel alcohol. It's when they say let it breathe, it means let's get rid of all the crappy bits.
Yeah.
So
it's a way of like hiding multiple sins.
Sometimes yes, sometimes it's also because for example, in seriously aged Bordeaux, there's a lot of Brettanomyces. Now, a lot of people are trained to reject Brettanomyces, and Brettanomyces does soften, the very aggressive horsey character does soften with aeration. So there's an element of that. It's about integration. There's an interplay with wine and oxygen, which is actually significantly less the easiest way I can put it is significantly less relevant to beer. And also, that whole business is disgusting. Just drink your damn drink.
Yeah, always swallow when tasting beer. And also, I mean, beer has carbonation to it as well. So if you do try to aerate it too much, you're going to get a different mouthfeel to what people will get when they're just drinking it. So in terms of judging, it's not the most helpful.
You might look like you've got rabies as well.
Just started dribbling.
Foamy.
Yeah. There you go. And on the rabies note,
carbonic acid that you start driving out of it will actually start burning your tongue after a while. So,
so we've run out of time for this segment. Thanks so much, Melissa, for joining us. I think we're cooking up a storm together at 5:15.
Yeah,
I've got
to go and do an outfit change.
There you go. Of course you do. Us too.
Melissa, have you got anything you want to plug before you go?
Buy a little book of lager, please.
Nice.
Thank
you. There you go. And of course the beer kitchen, which is wonderful.
And the beer kitchen, but mostly little book of lager. That's
okay. Mostly little book of lager. There you go. Guys, we'll see you at 3:15. We're going to be talking about nitro beers, which is dead exciting and something that Siren have committed to. So join us again at 3:15 on this channel. Just click the thumbnail in Canopy, and we'll be here waiting for you. Cheers, Melissa.
Thanks, everybody. Take care. Bye.
See ya.